So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take and flip this whole thing over, and we're going to glue. Once we start gluing, we want to move fairly quickly. That's why I like to have everything stacked up the way I want. So all I have to do is start folding things over. I don't have to think about the orientation of things. So what I'm going to do is put this first piece over here, and you noticed I flipped it over like this. The substrate I'm going to set over here so I can put glue on it easily. And I'm going to take our glue and put it in a disposable paint tray liner. I'm just using regular PVA glue. It's yellow glue that's been dyed brown. It's just for veneering, and it has a little bit of fillers in it that supposedly helps it keep from going through the pores of the wood. Any old regular yellow glue would work in this particular situation. Pour that in there, and I've got a small paint roller with an adhesive roller on it, and these are special rollers that are made for applying adhesives, and unlike a regular paint roller, it won't, the fuzz won't come off into the glue. We don't want any particles getting in between our substrate and our veneer. So load up the roller with glue, not too much. It's very difficult once you get glue on the substrate to actually get it off. So it's easier to add more than it is to take some off. It doesn't take as much glue as you might think. You want a nice even layer, relatively thin. Just a little more glue on the roller. Whenever I put fresh glue on, I start in the middle. If I start right on the edge, it'll squeeze a lot of overflow down the edge of my substrate, which I don't want. Now I'm going to, just to make sure it's nice and even, I'm just going to roll it out like that. You never take the veneer and put it onto the substrate. You always put the substrate onto the veneer. Because if I were to put this on here, the minute it touched the moisture, it could try to curl on me and I'd have a hard time getting it to sit down. So what I'm going to do is flip it over and set it down on there. Now, I'm just doing 2 or 3 panels. And they're the same size. I can stack them on top of each other like I'm doing. If I'm doing more than that, I might put them in 2 separate piles. But if I'm trying to do too many panels at once, I don't have a lot of open working time with yellow glue. I've only got about 5 to 10 minutes of working time before I have to get it into the bag. If I needed more open time, I would use a different kind of glue, like a urea formaldehyde, which you have to use respirators because it's a dangerous chemical. But I like to use this when I can. Alright. Now we flip this one over, and we've got our veneer, our paper, our caul. I'm feeling and making sure everything's staying lined up. Paper. Keep in mind I'm flipping it each time like this to keep it in the same orientation. And now we got to put some more glue on this substrate. And the last top caul goes on. Now to help temporarily hold this in place, I'm just going to put a couple pieces of tape to help pull it down tight and keep it from shifting when I put it in the bag. Alright. I want to get it into the bag as quickly as possible after putting the glue on. So you can hold this bag up. For a very large piece, you want to get a helper, because one of the things I want to do when I slide this in here is make sure it's not rubbing against the bag when it goes in, so that it shifts my stack. And I want to just put it in towards the middle there. You'll notice all these channels that are cut into the substrate that's in the bag. That's so if we didn't have those in there, the minute, here's where the air gets sucked out of the bag. The minute it sucked this down, no more air could be evacuated from the bag. But by having these channels starting that radiate out from the opening, even once the plastic gets pushed down, there's still air channels to pull vacuum. That's why I don't want this bottom substrate to be, or the bottom caul to be too much larger than the piece that we're doing, because same thing, once this gets pressed down on here, it could actually starve the middle and not get everything sucked out the way it should be. So once we have that in there, we snap this on temporarily. And all we're doing is sealing the bag here so that we don't have any leaks. There's two positions for the switch on the vacuum pump, and it's got an extra feature that if you push it down, it turns the vacuum on and it stays on until you turn it off. By going up onto the auto mode, it will, once it evacuates enough and it detects that it's got full vacuum, it'll stop pulling. It'll come back on if it detects a loss in pressure. It'll slowly start sucking the air out of here. And when it gets a little closer, I'm just going to kind of hold it with my hands so that things don't shift. And I can help smooth it out a little bit. Once it gets to this point, it's not going anywhere, and I can just let it do its thing. It's putting an enormous amount of pressure on every square inch here. So it's a great option versus using a mechanical press that's very large and unwieldy and has lots of handles on it. PVA glue dries using moisture removal, so it has to be exposed to air in order to get fully cured. Since we're in a vacuum in here, we're not getting any exposure to air, we can't get all the moisture out. So once this tacks up, and it's essentially the same as the way we have to clamp two pieces of wood together, there's a period of time where we have to keep it in clamps for about 30 minutes or so, then we take it out of clamps, but it's not fully cured for about 24 hours. Same with these panels. So after about an hour to 2 hours, we'll take it out of here, let it fully cure overnight before we do anything with the panels. Okay, our panels have come out of the bag after a couple of hours last night, and they've cured overnight. So they should be in good shape for us to take the tape off and scrape and sand them. So the first step for taking the tape off is it's very well dried on there. We need to wet it a little bit. So a cheap stamp liquor that you can get at the Staples or something like that, you can fill that with water and just wet the tape. And let that sit for 1 or 2 minutes. Right, after we wetted it the first time, we let it sit a couple minutes, and then we wetted it one more time and let it sit another minute or two. So now it should be ready. And you want to wait long enough, because if you try to do it too early, it's not going to come off cleanly. So now that it's nice and wet, it should just pull right off. And this is a lot easier than trying to just scrape or sand the tape off directly, because it will clog the sandpaper, it'll clog your scraper. Now we don't have any tape on it, but we do have a little bit of residue. So at this point we want to let this dry just a little bit, and then we can scrape and sand it.